In this video, we'll talk about some calculations of our costs. So first of all, the homework and to some degree the quizzes like to give you these tables with some information or a word problem with a scenario with information in it, and then ask you to calculate something about costs based on that information. So here you can see we have this table. As some information has been provided to us, we're going to have to do some calculating of the rest of the values on this table. So before we do that, let's talk one more time about the types of costs that we need to remember. First of all, we have our total cost, and our total cost is comprised of fixed cost, which doesn't change. For example, we bought a farm for some amount of money, and as long as we're paying for that farm, it's not changing. Variable costs do change. As we produce more stuff, we need to hire more labor, more inputs, and so on. And so as we produce more stuff, variable cost will go up. Total cost is equal to our fixed costs plus our variable costs. Then we have our marginal cost. Our marginal cost just asks if we produce one more unit, how much additional will it cost us? Then we have our averages. Our averages are just our, in this case, average variable cost would be variable cost divided by quantity, and average total cost is total cost divided by quantity. And you can see that we can't divide by 0, so these are x'd out. You can't go from producing -1 units to 0 units, so we also can't ask what's the marginal cost of producing 0 units. All right, but from there, we can start filling in this table. And first, as I note here, we know that the fixed cost is fixed. And so if we're given that the fixed cost of producing any units, regardless of whether you produce nothing at all or as much as you can, that's all going to be the same. So here we can just fill in our fixed cost. And it's important to remember, especially as we move forward into the next chapter and the next midterm, that these fixed costs in the short run are paid no matter what. So they're sunk. Even if you produce a quantity of 0, you're still paying the fixed costs of 50. And so that may factor into the decision of the producer in terms of how much to produce. All right, so we also know that if we produce 0 units, we have to pay our fixed cost, but if we're not producing anything, then we don't have to, say, get any seeds to plant or hire any workers or so on. So our variable cost would be 0. We can fill that in. We also know that our total cost is equal to fixed plus variable cost. So there's a couple spots on the table that we can fill in here. We know the quantity of 1, our total cost will be 80, fixed plus variable. We know that if the total cost is 100 and 50 of it was fixed, 50 must be variable. Or here, the difference is 105, right? So we can fill those in. All right, having done that, we can also do now some averages by dividing by the quantity. Right, so we need some average variable and average total cost. So wherever we have variable and total cost filled in now, we can get to our averages by just dividing by quantity. So for example, we want the average variable cost of producing 2 units. It's going to be 50 divided by 2. All right, so we just filled in all of our averages based on what we had in our totals divided by quantity. We now know that the marginal cost is the change in total cost when an additional unit is produced. All right, so what's the marginal cost, for example, of going from 1 to 2 units? Well, we're adding 20 to the total cost, so the marginal cost is 20. Here, what's the additional cost when we produce one more unit? 25, and then 30, and so on. Right, so the marginal cost is the change in total cost, and with that, we're able to fill in everything on the table. Now, the homework problems, some of them ask you to do multiple steps on a table like this. The quiz is multiple choice, so and the exam is as well. And so generally you won't have to do all of the steps that we just did, but you may be given a table or a word problem and have to do 1 or 2 of those steps in order to get to an answer. So again, make sure you're understanding what those definitions mean and then how you can calculate them based on some information that you've been given. If you're having a hard time with this, again, reach back out. I'm happy to talk a little bit more about it. And I think I have an example or two of a word problem that you could see. So Sammy likes to drink coffee. She buys a coffee machine for $50. After 100 cups of coffee, she calculates that she has spent 150 in total. So which of the following statements is true? First of all, the fixed cost of this coffee is $50. Well, she bought the coffee machine. It's assumed that before she started drinking any coffee, what was the cost of producing 0 coffee? It was $50, so that is a fixed cost. And then the variable cost, once she started drinking coffee, how much additional did it cost her? Well, for producing 0 cups of coffee, it would have cost her, the coffee machine, $50. After 100 cups of coffee, she spent 150. So the total variable cost of producing more coffee is 100. Then in addition, if it cost $100 to produce 100 additional cups of coffee, what is the marginal cost on average? If she produces a 101st cup of coffee, it will cost her $1 more on average. All right, so all of the above statements are true here from this word problem. All right, so I think I will stop it there, and I will come back and do one more video on the short versus the long run.